The rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise apartment, a percussive rhythm that usually soothed me. Tonight, it felt like an omen. I was Alara, and at 27, my life was a fortress of my own design. Every piece of minimalist furniture, every line of code humming on my triple-monitor setup, every reinforced lock on my door was a testament to a single, driving principle: self-reliance. I was a cybersecurity analyst, a digital ghost who hunted other ghosts in the machine. I built walls, both digital and emotional, and they were, I believed, impenetrable. The intercom buzzed, a harsh, unwelcome sound that sliced through the calm. I wasn't expecting anyone. My few friends knew to text first. Frowning, I tapped the screen. The grainy, black and white image flickered to life, showing 3 drenched figures huddled under the building's small awning. For a moment, my brain refused to process the image. It was like seeing a photograph from a burned-down house suddenly materialize. There he was. Robert. My father. Older, his shoulders slumped with a weariness I'd never seen, his hair more gray than brown. Beside him, clinging to his arm, was Celine. Even soaked and desperate, she held her chin high, a queen surveying a kingdom she had long since lost. And behind them, shivering and looking utterly lost, was Isabella. The spoiled daughter. The replacement. My breath hitched. 15 years. 15 years of silence, of birthdays without a card, of Christmases with an empty chair. He had left me when I was 9. He and his new wife, Celine, had packed for what they told my grandmother was a 2-week celebratory vacation to Europe with Isabella. They needed to bond as a new family. I had cried, clutching my grandmother's hand, as their taxi pulled away. 2 weeks turned into a month. A month turned into a postcard from Paris saying they were extending their trip. Then the postcard stopped. The phone calls I made to his new number went unanswered. He had vanished, taking my childhood with him. My grandmother, Clara, had been my rock. She raised me on a meager pension, teaching me that dignity wasn't in what you had, but in what you could build for yourself. Don't you ever let them make you feel small, Alara, she'd say, her hands kneading dough on our small kitchen table. Your worth isn't tied to anyone who can walk away. She had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me this apartment and the unshakable foundation of her love. Now, the people who had tried to make me small were at my door. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. I let the intercom buzz again, then a third time. Finally, with a sigh that felt like I was exhaling a decade of pain, I pressed the talk button. Yes? My voice was clipped, professional. The voice I used on conference calls with clients. Alara? Oh, thank God. It's Dad. Robert's voice was thin, reedy. It lacked the booming confidence I vaguely remembered. I said nothing. Let him squirm. Honey, please, we need to talk to you. It's important, he stammered. Beside him, Celine leaned in. Alara, darling, don't be difficult. Just let us up. We're getting soaked. Darling. The word was a drop of poison. I remembered her using it in a sickly sweet tone the day they left, patting my head like I was a dog she was leaving at a kennel. Against my better judgment, a morbid curiosity won out. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see what time and, apparently, misfortune had done to the people who had treated me like a piece of luggage they'd decided not to check. I buzzed them in. The few minutes it took for the elevator to ascend to the 24th floor felt like an eternity. I smoothed down my simple black dress, ran a hand through my short, dark hair, and stood by the door, my arms crossed. I wasn't the 9-year-old girl they left behind. I was the architect of my own life, and they were about to walk into my world, on my terms. When they knocked, I opened the door. The sight of them up close was more shocking than on the small screen. Their clothes, which I could now see were once expensive, were worn and ill-fitting. Celine's designer handbag was scuffed. Isabella, who was probably around 24 now, looked pale and petulant, her eyes darting around my spacious, modern living room with a mixture of awe and envy. Elara, Robert began, stepping inside, water dripping from his coat onto my polished concrete floor. You look wonderful. What do you want? I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. Celine bristled, stepping forward as if to take charge. Is that any way to greet your father? We've had a terrible run of bad luck. The family business, there were complications. We've lost everything. Everything, Isabella echoed, her voice a whine. My car, our house, it's all gone. I looked from one face to the next. The desperate father, the indignant stepmother, the spoiled stepsister. They looked at me with hungry eyes, not seeing a daughter or a person, but a solution. A lifeline. They thought that after 15 years of absolute neglect, they could just show up and I would be their safety net. We need help, honey, Robert said, his voice cracking. A place to stay for a little while. Some money to get back on our feet. Your family. Family. The word hung in the air, a bitter joke. My family was the grandmother who read to me every night, who saved for months to buy me my first computer, who held me when I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't good enough for my own father to love. A cold calm settled over me. The 9-year-old girl inside me, the one who had yearned for them, was silent. In her place was a woman who had learned to survive. I looked at the three of them, dripping water onto my floor, bringing their chaos into my ordered world, and I felt nothing but a distant, analytical curiosity. They had miscalculated. They assumed I was still the child they had abandoned, soft and forgiving. They had no idea who I had become. They had no idea what I was capable of. I see, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Let me think about it. Come back tomorrow. It was a dismissal, not a promise. But in their desperation, they saw it as a victory. A flicker of triumph crossed Celine's face. Robert looked relieved. They turned and left, leaving a puddle of rainwater and the stench of their desperation in my pristine foyer. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against it, my heart pounding not with fear or sadness, but with a slow-burning, icy rage. They thought they were back to claim a prize. They had no idea they had just walked into a trap of their own making. And I, Elara, held the key. The night was long. Sleep offered no escape, only a haunted gallery of memories. I was 9 again, standing on the cracked pavement of my grandmother's driveway. The sun was bright, too bright for such a dark day. I remembered the exact texture of Isabella's pink, frilly dress as she flounced into the taxi, not even giving me a backward glance. I remembered the scent of Celine's cloying perfume. Most vividly, I remembered my father's face. He knelt, gave me a quick, awkward hug, and said, "Be a good girl for Grandma, Elara. We'll bring you back a souvenir." He never looked me in the eye. That was the part that stayed with me. The shame in his gaze was a tacit admission that this wasn't just a vacation. It was an escape. An escape from me. In the present, I sat at my desk, the city lights of downtown twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The puddle of rainwater was long gone, but their presence lingered. I had spent the first few hours after they left in a state of clinical detachment, running threat assessments in my head as if they were a piece of malware. But now, the firewall around my heart was cracking. The hurt, deep and ancient, was seeping through. My grandmother, Clara, had never badmouthed him. Instead, she had armed me. She bought me books on powerful women, taught me how to budget, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to stand up for myself. When I showed an aptitude for computers, she took out a small loan to buy me a top-of-the-line PC, eating nothing but soup and toast for months to pay it off. "Knowledge, Elara," she'd said, tapping the monitor. "And skill. That's power no one can ever take from you." Her lessons were the code upon which I'd built my life. And now, that code was being tested. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Elara, it's your father. I know this is a lot to ask. But I've missed you every day. Please, find it in your heart to help us." I snorted. Missed me every day. A lie so bald it was almost insulting. If he'd missed me, he had a funny way of showing it. 15 years, over 5,000 days of silence. I deleted the message without replying. Minutes later, an email. This one from Celine, her name a jarring sight in my inbox. Subject, a matter of urgency. Elara, while your father is sentimental, I will be direct. We are in a precarious position. Your success is evident, and it is a child's duty to care for their parents in times of need. We expect you to do the right thing. We will be back tomorrow at noon for your answer. See to it that it is the correct one. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The entitlement, the thinly veiled threat. They hadn't changed at all. They had just run out of money. This was no longer just about hurt feelings. This was a tactical situation. They saw me as a resource to be exploited. It was time to use the skills my grandmother had so dearly paid for. It was time to do some digging. I cracked my knuckles, the familiar sound a small comfort. First, Robert. His digital footprint was pathetically small. A ghost. But Celine and Isabella were another story. For 15 years, they had lived a life of loud, ostentatious wealth. And the internet never truly forgets. I started with Celine's family business, a boutique import-export company her father had founded. Public records were easy enough to pull. I found the company's filings, its history of directors, its financial statements. It didn't take a forensic accountant to see the story. After her father died 10 years ago, Celine and Robert had taken over. The profit margins began to shrink. The debt-to-asset ratio skyrocketed. There were reports of lavish business expenses, yachts, luxury cars, parties disguised as client meetings. They hadn't just run the business, they'd bled it dry. It had officially filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. Next, Isabella. Her social media, though now mostly scrubbed, was a goldmine. Using archival tools, I resurrected her digital past. Instagram posts from a penthouse in Monaco, a ski chalet in Aspen, a beach in the Maldives. Photos of her with shopping bags from every high-end brand imaginable. The dates were what interested me. The most extravagant posts were from the last 2 years, a period when, according to the business records, the company was already deep in the red. They weren't just spending profits, they were spending borrowed money, liquidation assets, anything they could get their hands on, trying to maintain the illusion of wealth. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a slow-motion crash of their own making, fueled by greed and stupidity. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place around 4 a.m. I found a record of a massive, high-interest private loan taken out against their now-seized mansion. The lender wasn't a bank. It was a notoriously ruthless investment firm known for its aggressive collection tactics. The final payment was due a week from now. If they defaulted, the consequences would be more than just financial. These were not people you ignored. So that was it. This wasn't just about being homeless. They were terrified. They weren't just begging for a safety net, they were running from sharks they had invited into their own water. I leaned back in my chair, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in shades of gray and lavender. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But it was now overlaid with something else, clarity. Cold, sharp, and absolute. They hadn't come to me for family. They had come because they were out of options, and they saw me as their last, best mark. I looked at the picture on my digital dashboard, a scanned photo of me and Grandma Clara, smiling on the day I graduated college. Her eyes seemed to hold a question. I knew my answer. I wasn't going to be their mark. I was going to be their reckoning. My move wouldn't be about giving them what they wanted. It would be about giving them what they deserved. The next day, the city was bright and clean after the storm, but a tempest was brewing within me. I operated on a few hours of sleep, fueled by black coffee and a righteous sense of purpose. The information I had gathered was my armor. Noon was the deadline Celine had set, but I had no intention of waiting for them to come to me. I was taking control of the narrative. I spent the morning making a few calls, leveraging my professional network in ways I never had for personal reasons. A friend in financial law confirmed my suspicions about the private lender. They were essentially legal loan sharks, and their contracts were ironclad. Another contact helped me pull property and credit reports, painting an even grimmer picture of their financial ruin. They had nothing left. No assets, no credit, no allies. Only a daughter they had thrown away 15 years ago. Around 11, I decided to change the venue. My home was my sanctuary. I wouldn't allow another confrontation there. I sent a single, terse text to the number Robert had used. Meet me at the Daily Grind Cafe on 4th and Main. 12:30, come alone. I chose the cafe deliberately. It was a bustling, impersonal place where raised voices would draw unwanted attention. It was also 2 blocks from my old elementary school, a place he would have to pass to get there, a small, psychological jab that was purely for me. I arrived early and chose a small table in the corner, giving me a clear view of the entrance. At 12:35, Robert shuffled in, looking even more lost and haggard in the daylight. He scanned the crowd, his eyes landing on me with a flicker of pathetic relief. "Elara," he said, sitting down, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. "I got your text. Celine wasn't happy I was to come alone." "I don't care what makes Celine happy," I said, my voice flat. "I've been looking into your situation." His face paled. "What do you mean?" "I mean the bankruptcy of Celine's family business. The bad investments. The astronomical debt you racked up while pretending you were still rich. I mean the high-interest loan from Apex Holdings that's about to come due." Each statement landed like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, the facade of the concerned father dissolving into that of a cornered, defeated man. How did you know all that?" "It's what I do for a living, Robert. I find things people try to hide. You spent 15 years living a lie, and the bill has finally come due. This isn't a run of bad luck. This is the direct result of your choices." He couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead into his empty coffee cup. "We made mistakes," he mumbled. "Celine, she likes nice things. I wanted to give her and Isabella everything." "You already had a daughter," I said, the words sharp and cold. "You had me. Was I not worth everything? Was I not even worth a phone call?" Tears welled in his eyes. They might have even been genuine. But after a lifetime of lies, his sorrow meant nothing to me. "I was a coward, Elara. I was. I let Celine convince me that you were better off with your grandmother, that we would just be a disruption. It started as a vacation, I swear. And then, it just became easier to stay away. To send money, which I did, for the first few years. I knew about the money. My grandmother had told me. For 2 years, checks had arrived sporadically. She never cashed a single one. She put them in a box. His guilt money, she'd called it. We don't need it. We have ourselves." Before he could continue his pathetic confession, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from a social media alert I'd set up. Isabella had just made her Instagram account public again and posted a story. My curiosity piqued. I opened it. It was a picture of a ridiculously expensive latte from a high-end cafe across town, the foam in the shape of a leaf. The caption read, "Manifesting the comeback. It's always darkest before the dawn. #positive vibes #family first." I almost laughed out loud. The sheer, unadulterated cluelessness of it. Here was her father, begging for their financial lives, and she was spending their last few dollars on an overpriced coffee and spouting hollow inspirational quotes. She was a product of her environment, a perfect echo of her mother's vanity and her father's avoidance of reality. I turned the phone around and showed the screen to Robert. "This is your other daughter. Manifesting the comeback. Does she have any idea the kind of trouble you're in?" He stared at the image, and a flicker of something, shame, maybe even anger, crossed his face before it was extinguished by his usual weakness. "She's optimistic. She's a child," I corrected him. "A child you raise to believe that consequences are for other people. You all are. You broke your family, you destroyed a business, and now you're being hunted by creditors, and you think the solution is to show up at my door and have me fix it. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. You told me to come back with an answer. I have one. I am willing to discuss a solution. A comprehensive one. But it will be on my terms. All of my terms. You, Celine, and Isabella will meet me tomorrow. My office building. 10 a.m. I'll book the conference room. Hope, desperate and pathetic, lit up his face. Really? Elara, thank you. Anything. We'll agree to anything. Don't thank me yet, I said, standing up. You haven't heard my terms. I left him there, a ghost from my past sitting amidst the cheerful bustle of the cafe. As I walked out into the sunshine, I felt a strange sense of calm. The lies were unraveled. The truth was on the table. They thought they were coming to a negotiation tomorrow. They thought they had found their savior. They were wrong. They were coming to a sentencing. And I had already prepared my verdict. On my computer, in a heavily encrypted folder, was a single file labeled The Move. The final piece of my plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. The kind of justice my grandmother would have understood, harsh, fair, and rooted in the cold, hard soil of reality. The conference room on the 30th floor was a sterile box of glass and steel, overlooking the sprawling city. It was a place of power, of high-stakes negotiations and corporate dominance. I had chosen it for that very reason. This was my territory. The large mahogany table reflected the morning light, and I had placed a single bottle of water at each of the 4 seats. There would be no coffee, no pleasantries. This was not a reunion. It was an audit. I was there at 9:45, dressed in a sharp, dark gray pantsuit. My posture was straight, my expression neutral. When my phone buzzed with a notification from the front desk at precisely 10 o'clock, I told them to send the Anderson party up. They walked in looking like they were attending a funeral where they hoped to be named the primary beneficiaries of the will. Robert was nervous, Celine was attempting an air of regal composure, and Isabella looked bored and resentful, as if this was a massive inconvenience. She was texting, not even bothering to look up until her mother shot her a sharp glare. Elara, Celine began, her voice smooth as silk, taking a seat as if she owned the place. This is a much more appropriate setting. Now, what have you decided? She was already framing it as my decision to give them what they wanted. Please, sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs. My voice was calm, measured, echoing slightly in the large room. They all sat opposite me, a panel of defendants before their judge. I let the silence hang in the air for a full minute, watching them squirm. Robert fidgeted with his water bottle. Isabella sighed dramatically. Celine's mask of composure began to crack around the edges, a muscle twitching in her jaw. Before we discuss any potential solution, I began, my eyes locking onto Robert's. I want to establish the facts. Not the story you've told yourselves, but the truth. I didn't need notes. The facts were burned into my memory. 15 years ago, you, Robert, abandoned your 9-year-old daughter. You didn't just go on vacation, you methodically and deliberately erased me from your new life. You left me with my grandmother, a pensioner, while you and your new family lived a life of luxury. I shifted my gaze to Celine. You facilitated this. You saw a child as an inconvenience to your perfect new life, an unwanted accessory. You then proceeded, with my father, to systematically run your own family's legacy into the ground through greed and incompetence. You lived on borrowed time and other people's money, teaching your daughter that image is more important than integrity. Finally, I looked at Isabella. She flinched, finally putting her phone down. And you. You are the product of this. While I was learning the code to earn a scholarship, you were learning which brand of champagne pairs best with caviar. While my grandmother was sacrificing to give me a future, you were living the life that was, in part, stolen from me. Your manifesting on Instagram yesterday was particularly insightful. Isabella's face flushed a blotchy red. That's not fair. Fair? I echoed, my voice dangerously soft. Let's talk about fair. Is it fair that I spent my 10th birthday waiting for a phone call that never came? Is it fair that I had to watch my grandmother work her fingers to the bone because her son-in-law decided he preferred a life without responsibilities? Don't you dare speak to me of fairness. Silence. Thick and suffocating. Now, to the present, I continued, my tone all business. You are functionally bankrupt. You have liquidated every asset. And you are about to default on a loan to Apex Holdings, a group that does not accept sob stories as payment. You are not just in trouble. You are in danger. And you have come to me, not out of love or remorse, but out of pure, unadulterated desperation. Is there anything I've said so far that is factually incorrect? No one spoke. Robert stared at the table, a broken man. Celine's face was a mask of cold fury. This was not going how she'd planned. Then, the dam broke. What do you want from us, Alara? Robert cried out, his voice thick with tears. An apology? I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I was weak and stupid and I have regretted it every single day. Regret is a feeling, Robert. It's not an action, I replied coldly. Celine slammed her hand on the table. Enough of this melodrama. Yes, we need money. Your father is a wreck, Isabella is fragile, and I am not built for poverty. You are our daughter, she said, her gaze including Robert. You have a moral obligation. We need $250,000 to settle the Apex loan and enough to secure a decent apartment. It's the least you can do after everything. The sheer nerve of it was almost impressive. She was demanding $250,000 as her due. This was the moment. The final, desperate plea. This was where they expected me to either break down and write the check, or throw them out. They expected an emotional reaction. They weren't prepared for a strategic one. I reached down beside my chair and pulled up a sleek, leather-bound folder. I slid it across the polished table. It stopped directly in the center, equidistant from all three of them. I told you I had a solution, I said, my voice steady. And I do. I am willing to help you. To put this entire matter to rest, permanently. A wave of relief washed over Robert's face. Celine leaned forward, a greedy glint in her eye, reaching for the folder. Isabella looked intrigued for the first time. They thought this was it. The settlement. The numbers. The sweet relief of a bailout. Everything you need to start your new life is in that folder, I said. My final offer. My move. Celine's manicured fingers opened the cover, her eyes scanning the first page, expecting to see a bank wire confirmation or a cashier's check. Instead, her face went from triumphant, to confused, to utterly, incandescently enraged. What is this? She hissed, her voice trembling with fury. Robert and Isabella leaned in to look. And I watched as the last vestiges of hope died in their eyes, replaced by pure, uncomprehending horror. They finally understood. I wasn't here to save them. I was here to teach them. The folder contained not a check, but 3 simple, printed documents. They were laid out with the cold, irrefutable logic of a legal contract. The first document was a job application for a warehouse stocking position at a major distribution center on the industrial outskirts of the city. The shifts were long, the work was physical, and the pay was hourly. At the top, in crisp, bold letters, was the name, Robert Anderson. The second was a course brochure for a night class at the local community college, Bookkeeping and Small Business Accounting 101. It detailed the syllabus, the schedule of evening classes, and the modest tuition fee. It was for Celine Anderson. The third was a recruitment flyer from a popular fast food chain. It advertised open positions for team members, highlighting flexible hours, a free uniform, and minimum wage. It was designated for Isabella Anderson. Beneath these 3 documents was a final, single page. It was a formal offer, drafted by my lawyer. It stated that I, Elara Vance, would pay the first month's rent on a one-bedroom apartment in a modest, working-class neighborhood, far from the glamour of my downtown building. I would also pay the tuition for Celine's community college course. This offer was contingent on one, non-negotiable condition: all three of them had to secure and maintain these, or equivalent, full-time jobs for a period of 90 days. Proof of employment and pay stubs would be required. There was no mention of the $250,000 debt to Apex Holdings. Celine's hand, which had opened the folder with such avarice, was now trembling. She looked up at me, her face a grotesque mask of disbelief and rage. "This is a joke. A sick, twisted joke." "It's not a joke," I said calmly, my hands folded on the table. "It's a lifeline. It's the most generous offer you are going to get." "A warehouse," Robert whispered, his voice hoarse. "Me? I'm almost 60 years old." "You look healthy enough," I replied, my voice devoid of sympathy. "My grandmother was 65 when she took on a second cleaning job to pay for my first computer. And I'm supposed to flip burgers?" Isabella shrieked, looking as if I'd suggested she volunteer for ritual sacrifice. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I have a very clear idea of who you are," I said, meeting her gaze. "You're an able-bodied adult with no skills and no work history. This is called a starting point. Most people have one when they're 16, not 24. The fury in Celine's eyes was terrifying. She stood up so abruptly her chair screeched backward. "You cruel, ungrateful little witch. After everything your father has done. You would humiliate us like this? We came to you for help, not for a lecture and a sentence to hard labor." "You're mistaken," I said, standing to meet her. We were eye to eye. "You didn't come to me for help. You came for a handout. Help is what's in that folder. It's a chance, a blueprint for how to build a life. The kind of chance you never gave me. You taught me nothing about family, so my grandmother taught me about work. About dignity. About earning your place in the world. I'm not giving you money to pay off the consequences of your greed. I'm offering you the tools to build something for yourselves, from nothing. That is my help. That is my move." I let the words sink in. The truth of them was absolute, undeniable. I wasn't punishing them. I was offering them the only real path forward, the one they were too proud and too lazy to see. "What about the Apex loan?" Robert asked weakly, the reality of their situation finally crashing down on him. They'll ruin us." "That loan is your problem," I stated. "You took it out to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford. You will have to face them and figure out a payment plan. Perhaps with the income from your 3 new jobs, you can begin to make amends. It's called responsibility." Celine let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Never. I would rather live on the street than stoop to this." "That is, and always has been, your choice," I said softly. With a final, withering glare, Celine snatched her purse, grabbed Isabella by the arm, and stormed out of the conference room. Isabella looked back at me, her expression a strange mix of hatred and, for a fleeting second, a flicker of bewildered understanding, before she was pulled away. Robert remained, slumped in his chair. He looked from the folder to me, his face a canvas of shame and despair. "I really did it, didn't I?" he murmured to himself. "I lost everything." "You lost me a long time ago, Robert," I said, not unkindly. The rest just followed. He slowly got to his feet and, without another word, shuffled out of the room, leaving the folder, the lifeline, sitting in the middle of the vast, empty table. I was alone. The silence of the room was profound. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt quiet. The raging storm inside me had finally passed, leaving behind a clean, peaceful calm. The 9-year-old girl who had waited by the phone wasn't crying anymore. She was free. Later that afternoon, I drove out to the small, peaceful cemetery where my grandmother was buried. I placed a bouquet of her favorite flowers, white lilies, on the simple headstone. I did it, "Grandma," I whispered to the wind. "I remembered your lessons. I didn't let them make me feel small." I told her everything. About their desperation, their entitlement, and the offer I had made them. I knew they wouldn't take it. They would choose to face the loan sharks or vanish into obscurity before they would accept the dignity of work. But that was their story now, not mine. As I walked away from the grave, I didn't look back. The ghosts of my past were finally laid to rest. My fortress was no longer a defense against hurt, it was simply my home. And for the first time in 15 years, the future felt like an open road, not an escape route. I was Alara Vance, and I was finally, completely, on my own. And it was more than enough.